To have passion in life is everything.
What's your Everest?
Oh,
Is it
yeah.
that 200-inch buck?
They just look so impressive when they're wide.
Especially running away.
Welcome to this week's episode of Eastmans Elevated.
It's like a think tank for outdoor activity.
Sounds exactly like my hunting. Just always thinking about it, always trying to evolve it and make it better.
Here's your host, Brian Barney.
Hey, what's happening, guys? Got a brand new Eastmans Elevated for you. So today on the podcast, I have back on my buddy Sam Davis. Sam is an absolute killer. The guy consistently produces trophies with his bow and arrow year after year. So much respect for what this guy does. He's got so much passion for bow hunting, and so just made for an awesome conversation. And so what I really wanted the point of today's conversation to be was what makes him consistently successful. What does he think his biggest attribute towards his successful hunting is? And, you know, I had a hunch that it would be similar to mine, and I think it is. So we had this great conversation, able to talk over his season from last year, some of the things that really helped make him successful, and just made for a great in-depth bow hunting conversation. So I loved it. I think you guys are going to love it as well. I just want to thank my sponsor for today's show, Stone Glacier. I am so excited to be partnered with Stone Glacier, as I feel like their company builds technical mountaineering gear for the style that I like to hunt. Everybody on their staff are top-notch, accomplished mountain hunters, and they build lightweight, minimalist gear that'll stand up under the harshest conditions. So this year I'll be using their sleep systems. I'm going to be using their tents. I'm really excited at what they offer here. So their Sky Air Ultra fits me perfectly. It's a bivy tent, and it's a modular system. So at its lightest, you can take in just the shell for 10 ounces. That's just over a half a pound. And then you can add pieces and parts. You can add a vestibule to help block the wind and to store your gear in a dry spot. You can add the mesh for when there's bugs. Anytime I'm hunting with mosquitoes, hunting where there's a bunch of mice so they don't run over me all night, or I hunt this one place that's got these giant spiders. I've also ran into scorpions hunting down in Nevada, so that's where I'll employ that mesh. It also has a bathtub floor that you can add to it for really wet conditions. And so basically you can take this tent from anywhere from 10 ounces to 3 pounds and being a bomb-proof shelter. Where I'll use it most is about in the 1.5 pound range. It sets up with a couple trekking poles, and that's just so lightweight and great for my early season hunting on the move, easy to set up. So super excited about that. They also have some other tents. They have a two-person tent, and I saw this one. Remy used it in New Zealand, the Skyscraper two-person. It's a self-standing two-person tent with a bunch of room, great fly on it to keep you dry. It's going to be a great tent, and word is they also have a freestanding one-person tent that's going to come out this year as well. They also have a Sky Dome 6-person, which is a bomb-proof shelter, and then I'll also be using their sleeping bags. Their sleeping bags have a great weight-to-warmth ratio. They have a 15-degree and a 0-degree. The 15-degree, it comes in at right around 2 pounds, 3 ounces. That's a great lightweight sleeping bag. I'm so excited to be using this season. It's just a minimalist weight, going to keep me warm, and having a 0-degree and a 15-degree gives me options. So, like I say, I'm really excited to be partnered with this company. If you're in the need for any of their mountain gear, make sure to check them out at Stone Glacier. Okay, guys, make sure to check out everything we're doing at Eastmans. Make sure to check out the Beyond the Grid, Eastmans Hunting TV. Make sure to check out the magazines, Eastman's Bow Hunting, Eastman's Hunting Journal. If you want a promo code for that, Elevated321, we'll get you both magazines and an Outdoor Edge knife for $50. Also, make sure to check out our internet research tool, Tag Hub. If you put Brian in as the promo code, save you a little bit of money at the end. Those members also get the Beyond the Grid a month early. You get access to a bunch of promo codes with a bunch of our sponsors. They've got a few other perks to it, but make sure to check it out at Tag Hub. I know I'm using it a ton to research out-of-state units and opportunities, and getting ready for this application season. See if I can come up with some tags. So this is a great conversation. Let's get right into it. So this is Sam Davis. I'm your host, Brian Barney. Eastman's Elevated. Here we go. Yeah, we got her all figured out. Man, good to talk to you.
Yeah, good to talk to you too, man. It looks like you had an awesome season.
Oh, it was. Yeah, a bunch of killer adventures and a bunch of time to go chase critters around. So yeah, man, it was awesome. Kudos to you too. What a season.
Yeah, thank you. It was a blast. It was one for the books. You know what I mean? You just have you envision those seasons. It just everything. You set your goals and you just try to, lay it out. And it was one of those ones where it just everything kind of fell into place. So no complaints at all.
Man, that buck that you had scouted real hard, that one with the extra on both sides, what a buck. Was that out of your home state?
No, that was Montana. That was in your state. I was pit pocketing.
Good for you. Good for
you.
You. Man, you found a great one.
Oh, man. And you know how that Badlands country is. You never know. Like, if you turn up, I would have loved to have seen him next year, but I don't think he would have made it. I think someone would have slapped him with a bullet. I think. Yeah. I don't think he would have made it to 5.5 or 6.5. I honestly looking at his jaw and stuff, I think he was only a 4.5-year-old deer. And there was a part of me that's like, man, it's like, do I let him go or do I not? And that day that I found him, I was like, I'm gonna try and get an arrow. And because I watched him, I saw him 3 times throughout the summer. It's the first buck I've ever scouted and harvested. I've never ever had that come together ever. So it was pretty neat to do that, I guess.
Huh. What do you think the key to making it happen on a buck you scouted was?
I think it's just honestly location. I mean, I just knew where he was, and seeing him 3 different times, I knew a high ridge. Those mule deer love to know those high ridge vantage points. They like vantage points as much as we do, and it was a key factor. A big north-south running ridge, and it had some nasty gnarly fingers off of it, and I picked him off in there 2 different times on literally one side of a fence. Now, it was all on BLM, but the way the grass lease worked, the minute those guys moved cows into there, he shifted and moved to the other side of the same the big north-south ridge. He just moved to the other side of it. And I think just scouting diligently, if I wouldn't have scouted him and known when they put those cows in there, and I don't know if it would have taken me numerous days of finding him, but I had already found him after him and the other bucks had moved. There was about 6 of them. And they'd moved almost 2 miles, 1.5 miles, 2 miles. And I keyed in on that. And then he didn't leave. He was kind of there all throughout the tail end of September when I saw him and hunted him. So it was key. It was key to, honestly, it was literally knowing where the livestock were. Because the minute the livestock got in there and the grass got kind of grubbed down, those deer moved locations. Not far, but they did move enough that it was key that I was there and picked up on that.
Man, I'd say, yeah, I saw you scouted him in velvet. Looked like a bomber buck in velvet and in hardhorn. I mean, he was just a great buck all the way around. Like those 2 extras on both of those fronts, just a specimen. It sounds like you were hunting him in a really cool spot too. Like
it was
that ridge line. Did you have to hike up into that ridge line and then you could kind of glass down each one of those fingers?
Yep, exactly. You could sit on one end of it, and you had to. Man, it was really tricky because the winds always come out of the southeast there. I shouldn't say always. There's a lot of wind that comes out of the south, and it'll mess with you. Because I was on him 2 other times in September and never put a stock on him. The winds and where he would tuck himself in, he was one of those bucks that would go in the cedars. He wouldn't lay out in the sagebrush, maybe like underneath one cedar or juniper and have sagebrush around him. So where you could like slide in, he would go 40, 50 yards into a deep north-facing slope cedar thicket, and I couldn't do anything. I mean, like there was nothing I could do but sit there and watch him. And he did that 2 different times on me, and this time what I would guess, to back to your question, that ridge would run north-south. I could get vantage points on one high spot on it on the very south end of it, but I could sit and I could see some pretty good cuts of it. Other than that, the day I spotted him, I was on the ridge adjacent to it that paralleled it. It was a smaller finger that ran north and south, but it was across the canyon, and I was looking up. I was actually, with my recurve, putting a stock on another buck almost a mile and something away, and I jogged back to my pickup, chucked my recurve, ran all the way back in there. In the meantime, I see 2 guys hiking in. They were at the bottom end of it. They were miles away. but still I was like, no way. And so I was at a dead run with went and got my compound. I was like, I didn't want to mess this one up. Maybe it was one of those ones where I should have been diligent to the old recurve, but I hadn't seen that buck in a week, and I kind of thought maybe he'd moved on to the private, maybe he'd got bumped. I didn't know where he'd went. And there was another big, clean 4x4, probably like a 160 deer that was just a pretty buck. And I actually put a stock on him, and I missed him with my recurve that morning. So I missed him at 28 yards, shot right over his back with the old recurve. And I was like kind of mad, and I wanted to hike up that finger, and I got to that ridge, and I looked across the canyon. My naked eye in some of that skunk brush, or like that, that knee deep, I call it skunk brush. It's like a skunk brush or buck brush that grows on those north and south facing slopes. But if it's on a south facing slope, by the end of September, it's starting to turn yellow and kind of red, and those deer eat those little leaves like crazy. And I looked in a patch of that, and sure enough, I could see a white butt. And this is like 8 o'clock in the morning on September 30th. So it's like 90-degree day. He was still up. Pull my binos up, and I could see that big flyer come off the side. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And so it was a mad dash. Truck was about a mile and a half back, and it was as fast as I could go down that ridge, got all the way down there. Chuck switched bows and then sprinted all the way back up. And I had to go, he was across the canyon. So not only was a mile and a half from the pickup, but then distance-wise, I had to do another mile, maybe better loop to get to the top end of the canyon and get my wind as good as I could. And you always say, like, don't just half-ass the wind. Like, it better be all right. I'm not even gonna lie. When I saw those two guys, I was like, man, I'm going for it. This buck I was on him 2 other times. I'd never put a stock on him, but he'd always gotten those cedars so thick that I could never make a move. And I was like, I'm not going to let him do that this time. He's focused on this skunk brush. He's eating it. I'm going. And the last time I saw him, he was grazing he was kind of working around, and he had the wind kind of coming from his right to left. And I was like, I'm just going to play that game and try and slide in behind him and hope that my wind is running right to left. And I just kept sliding in. Finally, I get eyes on him at about 70. He was facing dead away from me. And he had no idea I was there. I was already in my socks, and I slid around. I was able to cut another, 15, 20 yards off of it. And he was sitting there grazing. I took a pretty hard quartering away shot and put it right through him. And he ran about 60 yards. And it was on a steep cut, and I could see his antlers stop, and then his antlers disappeared, and a little 2-point came blowing out of the bottom. And I was like, man, I think he went down, but I couldn't see the absolute bottom. And you know how a bow hunt is. Like, it could happen. They can get away, whatever. And I look up with my rangefinder. I just pulled it out real quick, and at 60-some yards, I could see blood on the grass from 60 yards away, and I could see my arrow laying in the yellow grass. And I was like, that's a pretty good sign. And sure enough, I slid around, and when I saw his antlers disappear, he had fallen over. He was already dead within seconds. So,
dude, stroked him.
Yeah, it was best. Yeah, it was one of those shots that there's, people would question, but when you know your gear, your setup. I took an angle that was definitely a very steep quartering away shot, and I had a little elevation on him, and almost went in right in his hind quarter, and it came out right behind on the right pocket of that right front shoulder, blew all the way through him, and it hammered him. So yeah, it was a cherry on top to that whole adventure, and actually, first stock I put on him was a successful one, and all that time watching him this summer, I was by myself, and it was one of those ones where you just sit down and it was just unreal. I was overwhelmed with emotion that day. It was pretty cool.
Dude, that's way cool. That's as good as it gets. Like, that excitement of getting close, and like when you said you ducked down and you got 15 more yards, like those are those moments that I just cherish, that are like so fleeting, or they're so tough to create. They take so much work and dedication, to get to those points, but those are the moments that I love, where all those decisions matter. And you don't think about every decision you're making. You almost let your instincts take over. And like, after you've been doing it for quite a few years, like you have been consistently successful, you just start reacting to it. And it seems like you get more of those decisions right, just like the more experience you gain. But dude, that's so killer. You never know, that buck could have been 5 years old or so. Like, living in those cedars like that's pretty smart. I know. And he was one of those ones. The first time I ever saw him, he was on private. He was one of those ones that he rode that fine line of being the public private game. And
So yeah, he could have slipped away from guys running, and yeah, he lived in the thickets. And like I said, I hadn't seen him. I'd been out there 3 other times that week, and I hadn't seen him. So I had thought, yeah, that he had disappeared, and I'd kind of not given up on him completely, but I dang sure I was switching my focus. I had kind of an A and a B buck, and I was on my B buck. So yeah, he could have dodged a few guys. I was pretty stoked to see him when I saw him. I'll tell you that.
Dude, that's so awesome. They're tough to hunt in that thick stuff. Like, you're a man after my own heart. Like, I like the more open the terrain, the more open spotty beds, like the better I feel about my chances. And like, even if he beds in some cedars or in some trees, if I can glass across and see where he's at, I feel better about my chances.
Yes.
But when they disappear into that thick, like, I just, more times than not, anytime I try to get in there and make a move, I end up blowing them out. Now, there's been a few circumstances where I've got on elk that I'm kind of chasing in the thicks, but for the most part, when they get in that stuff, it doesn't matter if it's a deer or if it's an elk, my odds of killing that deer or elk go way down. And just like killing that buck, like, you get better at deciding when to go all in. And so, like, that buck had given you the slip 2 times into those thicks, and so like you knew to be aggressive because he was out in the open, out in that buckbrush, and now is your time to get on him. You know, I'm going to play that wind, that left or right or whatever you had. I'm definitely going to come in that side, but now is my chance. Now I'm all in. But that cover makes it tough.
Oh, totally. And you know, he was riding. You get out in that country and you get those like bands of cedars. Like, you get like a flagstone ledge, you know. So it'll be like a flat topped bench that's sagebrush, kind of a plateau, and then there'll be like a 6-8 foot wall of like a flagstone rim, and then it's a steep slide underneath it. And right on that flagstone rim, that top rim of the edge of that plateau, is all these spotted cedars and junipers, and he loved riding those rims of that. And then he would just crawl into those thickets, and those thickets might be 30, 40 yards across and then 30, 40 yards deep, and he'd lay right in the middle of it, and I literally would not have a play. And you know what? Watching him, you asked what was how scouting helped. Watching him helped me learn. I mean, not that I don't know a lot about those deer, but every time you go out, you're learning something. You should be learning something. If you're not, you're not going to get to be a better hunter, I guess. But watching there was a 3x4 that ran with him that I think was older. I do just body size and stuff. There's a 3x4. He's actually missing a front fork. Really, just a cool, big old pot-bellied deer. That deer was more of an open deer. He depended on his eyes. So watching the 2 mature bucks out of the group of 6, that buck would always lay out in the open. I can't say I could have killed him, but that buck was in stockable locations numerous times. And it would just frustrate me because you would literally see the big 3x4. He would lay down, or vice versa. They would always be up feeding together and moving around. And then the big 3x4 would lay down, and that other buck would walk right past him, 10, 15 more steps right into the thicket and bed down. I mean, it was every single time. In the summer when I watched them, scouting them, everything, you would always watch that buck walk right into the thicket, right past that big 3x4, and he would bed. The 3x4 would always be out on a bench or up underneath a lone cedar or paw out underneath a sagebrush cut. I mean, he was always the one that would present himself. And that other buck that I ended up getting, he would walk into the thicket. So yeah, it was really neat just to watch the deer habits for the individual deer. They were completely different on what they did. So that was really neat to learn too. I mean, I definitely learned something there. I definitely took note of that. Like, there's 2 kinds of bucks. There's a buck that feels more dependent on his ears and his nose, and then there's that buck that's completely dependent on I can't say completely, but more dependent on his eyes and his ears. You know, I saw a significant difference in the 2.
Man, like, just personalities and preferences, right? Just like
Yeah,
humans,
totally.
how we're all different. And, you know, not that one way's worse than another. Of course, like, the buck that beds in the open is better for us bow hunters, but maybe he's better at catching mountain lions, or maybe he's better at catching the rifle hunters, you know, coming up some of those open ridge lines from the bottom. Like who knows? They just have developed their own preferences to the terrain that they live in to keep themselves safe. But yeah, that's super interesting, man.
Yeah, it was neat to watch and to kind of put all that together as the summer went. First time I saw him was on July 22nd, and he was pretty much, I mean, the video that I put a video on Instagram, and I think that video I think the other time I saw him was like August 1st, and then I saw him right at the end of August before I started chasing antelope and actually going hunting for myself. But So that first video, though, he's like full grown July 22nd. He's walking into the trees as I took that video. And the other bucks, if I would have panned out in the video, you can see they're all laying out in the sagebrush already. And he was headed for the trees. So, I mean, it started from the very first time I saw him to the day I killed him. He was going for the brush. It was just a heck of a hunt to put together. And, you know, when I grabbed a hold of his antlers as I was walking down there and picked up his head, it was like I'd never felt that of actual scouting. You know, all those whitetail guys out east, you know, they know those deer, they have them named. And so it's pretty cool when they finally get to lay their hands on them. But to actually do that on a mule deer, it was cool. It was a neat feeling.
Yeah, well, and a bomber buck that, you know, just do anything to try to get an arrow in to catch up with that one is super awesome. Well, like that. You know, those bucks in that early season, like, you know, in the, like late August, early September, you can catch them slipping, but hunting them in that early season is tough. And even throughout September and October, those bucks have like really good places that they prefer, like where those deer were living, like off those finger ridges. And I imagine like one side of the hillside has got a lot of cedars in it and a lot of cover. And
Yep.
It's like sometimes in that early season, I killed a buck in the early season, but they're not spread out all throughout country. It's not like hunting the rut where they make mistakes or they're traveling and they're split up and, you know, by themselves roaming around, or they're with the does. Like during that early season, there's like 100 canyons and coulees that you have to look over to find that one spot where those, you know, like you said, those 6 bucks were living, or where those 4 or 5 bucks were living, because all their numbers.
It's a pocket.
Yeah, they run in these bachelor groups, and so you can go through miles of terrain and not even see a buck in there. You've got to find that spot that they like, and so like that's what that scouting did for you, is like being able to locate them during the summer routine, red coats on, out a little bit more, and then knowing where that buck lived and where he preferred, and hunting that spot, knowing there's some bucks around there. But that time of the year, you can go look at 10 or 15 other spots and not see a buck.
Yeah, totally. That's exactly how it is. And the thing is, too, is I think people think of, I guess not all people, but mule deer can do a lot with water and without water. I mean, what I mean by that is, man, I honestly think they were going maybe a day without water. I think those bucks, they were going a long ways, because there was a couple days. The one time that I spotted them in the early August, like August 1st, August 2nd, 10 days after I'd seen them originally, they were a long ways from where I'd seen them on July 22nd. But I watched them and I watched them, and they covered, I bet they covered 1.5 miles, and I think they were coming from water. I couldn't go down there because it's private, but I think that's what they were doing. And then I think also they might have had a seep earlier in July that had water in it. And not only did the cattle getting pushed into that one side of that ridge move them, but I think their water source had dried up. And so then later August, they were covering some country to go get water, but I don't think they were going every day. I mean, I've always heard that, but I've never been a big trail camera guy out in that dry country. I've never really, I guess, paid much attention to it. But the one day I caught those bucks traveling, and they were down in some low country, and they were coming back for that big high ridge. I watched them hike all the way back up in there, and it took them. They caught a bed at about 10:30 in the morning. They were 3/4 of the way up that ridge, but I mean, that was something else to take into consideration, even in that dry country. Because when I think of when a mountain hunting deer, I think those deer can get a lot of moisture out of their feet. I think it's a little bit different when you're hunting 10,000 feet deer and they got those lush, hillsides where the snow drifts are just melting into just melted into the ground. I think that grass holds a lot more moisture. But that dry country where I was, I mean, to find a green blade of grass, those bucks had to work for it. So I don't know how much they were getting out of the forage. So that was also something I kept really trying to figure out, because I would see them in the same spot. I saw them in the same spot back-to-back days, and then I guess I saw them 4 times. And then that other time I saw them, they were coming from a long ways, and I was like, man, they're getting their water from down there. So that was another thing that I put in my notes. It was just the water situation. I was definitely think they were bypassing water for at least a day, I think, before they were having to head out and find water. So mule deer are unbelievable animals, and I've hunted them in New Mexico and Arizona where they've had lack of water, but it's always during the rut, and those bucks down there are covering so much country. I think they're finding water wherever the does are. So anyways, that was something that I really took into consideration too, that was different.
Yeah,
And
that's good insight. Like, you're right. Mule deer just don't have to drink that much water. And I have keyed into water sources in like New Mexico and Arizona. It seems like the drier it is, the more water they need. But man, in that prairie country, it's amazing. Like, it seems pretty dried up when you're in there. And
yeah,
like some of that country I hunt, I mean, I don't even know where they're getting their water from. Like every once in a while, I'll come across a spring or catch some tracks in there, or come across a water tank, but they'll be miles away from it. And yeah, I
yeah,
think they go
miles.
multiple days without water in that country. It's just amazing. They just don't need much. It's not like an elk. And actually like hunting Nevada is super dry, and they've got some high country, and it's a little bit lusher up high, but it's still pretty burned off, and it's amazing. Those bucks will go days without water, and I hunt them on one ridge line where it's 3,000 feet to the top, and I know there's no water on that top end. I've been all over it in every drainage, every bottom, looking for water. You got to come all the way off the top, and those bucks do come down, but I think it's like you say, like every other day or every couple days, 2-3 days, or maybe they start feeding their way down and make it down there at night, but you sure don't see them drink very much. It's just wild how long they can go without water.
It is. It's crazy. That's one thing that I can't get over. Yeah, because you think of elk, and I mean, they're 2 times a day sometimes, those big bulls during the rut. But those bucks, they run a whole different program. That's
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah. God, and speaking of bulls, you killed a great one this year, man. That was a good 6-point. Good on you. That
Yeah,
was a Wyoming bull, right?
yeah, that was an area that my hunting partner Zach and we never hunted that unit, and we thought, let's try it. Let's try some throw a dart at a map kind of thing, and let's try hunting that unit. And we'd went in there a little bit scouting and found some stuff that we'd like that there's just nasty, gnarly, I mean, deep holes and big steep country, and it just had our name written on it. And yeah, we went in there. Actually, my hunting partner Zach, he smoked a gorgeous 6x7 on the second day of the season, or the third day of the season. I was out mule deer hunting, and he called me, and I was like, holy cow, you got it done. And so then I just couldn't wait to get up there, and then it rolled around. My wife and I actually headed up. She had a tag too, and we got in on some elk. We had a day and a half to hunt, and before my first stint of vacation wore out, after I'd been deer hunting, and we got on a giant, almost got my wife a stud bull. And there's just too many, it was one of those early herds where they still had 120, 150 in a herd. And there was a couple big bulls running that herd, and didn't quite get it done. And then I went back up 2 days. I had to work for 2 days, and I had the next 6-7 days off. And I went up by myself and threw a camp on my back and said, I'm going to go into here and kill an elk or chase the elk until I kill one, kind of thing. Took a couple of days worth of food and just bivvied out. And yeah, it worked out. It worked out slick. And oh man, that was one of those ones where you just you want it to work out. This is how you picture an elk hunt to be, and it like all the cards fell in that direction. So yeah, it was sweet. I was so anxious that morning to get to this spot. I wanted to just listen. But it was September 10th or 11th, and it was just dark, and it was quiet. And I'm sitting up there. I was so anxious. I left camp before I even brushed my teeth. So here I am sitting up on a ridge. I mixed my little oatmeal mix. I'm sitting there in the dark and listening for bugles. It's about 4 a.m. Brush my teeth, and I'm sitting there, and I don't hear anything. And it's so dark, but I want to just, how it is when you're just anxious. I had a good feeling about this spot, and finally, it starts cracking a little bit of daylight, and I actually saw a couple headlamps way across this ridge. And I'm like, man, there's nobody that's going to drop into here where I'm thinking about going. And sure enough, they post up, and I can see them a little bit through daylight. And about then I hear a whistle, but it's a long ways below me, or a bugle, but it's just the faintest of whistle I hear below me. And I was like, I'm going for it. That was enough to get me to go. Like, I couldn't see yet, but I was like, I need to go. But it sounded, it was a long ways away. And I bombed off in there, and I'd kind of told my hunting partner, Zach, I said, hey man, he was pounding nails. He's a carpenter, and he is his own boss. So he's on a pretty open schedule. I said, this is where I'm starting, and I might end up all the way here. I'll hit you on the inReach. If I do, I might catch a ride in a couple days. And he was all down for that. He was finishing up a big project, and then he was going to head up and chase mule deer while I was hunting elk. So anyways, long story short, I jumped off and started just listening to those bugles. And I set a goal this year that I wanted to try and kill a pretty good bull. I wanted to just not kill the first 6-point. I wanted to try and get a good one. And And I just kept pushing down in there, and first thing I came on was numerous, raghorns, and then I started getting into some a little bit bigger bulls. There were some 6 points that still hadn't quite herded up. They were, 290, 300-inch bulls, 4-year-olds, and they were kind of pulled off, and they were bugling, and now the bugles started getting louder and louder, and it sounded like Yellowstone Park, Brian. And it was in a burn, and so I just kept working my way down in there. And pretty soon I got eyes. Finally, I could hear a bull just piping off, and I got eyes on a bull across the canyon from me, and he was a stud. I don't know if he was as good as the one I ended up harvesting, but he was a good one. Anyways, I was like, that will work. He had thirds. When he looked at you, his thirds kicked straight out, just gorgeous, big old thirds. And he was bedded. He just tipped his head back and bugled. And he was in a thicket on the north-facing slope of a burn. But I was like, I think I can sneak in there. I think I can do this. So I got down across the creek and started working my way up working my way up. I dropped my camp because my camp was pretty heavy, but I still wanted my pack. But I at least threw my camp out in a spot where I could come back and get it, or if I needed to come back, just stay there for the night. It was a good spot. There was some water, and I continued on stalking, and I slid in on him. And by now I can hear the other side of the canyon where I was, and I can hear all the other bulls bugling. I can hear them better now that I was cross canyon from them. Well, I slide in on this bull, and I kind of get to a spot where I'm pinned down at about 100 yards, and he can see where I'm at, so I'm kind of done moving. And I don't know if he caught me moving or what, but he stood up, and he started working his way up the ridge. And I went with him for a little ways, and then I looked back across the canyon at the other herd, and I got eyes on another bull that was a little bit bigger. And my little bit of greediness got me, and I was like, this bull knows something's up. I'm going to backtrack down, grab my camp, and I'm going to bail across the canyon and work my way in over there and see what I can do. So I slid in. I had not only did I have a directional wind, but I had an up thermal too that was going the same direction. So I had a wind in my face. It was probably a solid 10 miles an hour. Just what you dream of, when you're sliding in on a herd. And I was on I guess it'd be on a south-facing slope, but it had a lot of topography to it, so there was some shade in it. Like, it was really rolling south-facing slope, but really steep. So the elk had pockets and stuff where, even though it was south-facing, they could get in there, and they had a little shade, and it was a really cool day. So they were kind of bedded out in the open. They were up grazing, but as I started sliding down in there, I was running fingers from finger to finger ridge, and I would get to one, and I would glass through this burn, and I see that I had a little bit of space and no eyes on me, and I'd slide down, work my way to the next one, and from finger I worked to the next finger, and pretty soon I popped up on a ridge, and I had cows at 60 yards, and I had raghorns at 70 yards, and I had a big bull, big clean 6x7. He was at about 125 yards. And from what I could tell, he had about 40 head of cows with him. And now I'm on a ridge that's running right to left, and they're in a pocket, like right below me. Everything's kind of down in this pocket right in front of me. And I can move right to left with cover. I can just step back about 4 steps, move to the left, pop back up. I mean, with that wind hit me in the face, and I just kept hearing this growl of a bugle. He wasn't even like screaming, he would just, that's all that I kept hearing. And it was down to my left, and so I just kept backing up, and I'd peek over, back up, peek over. And pretty soon I back up, and I peek over this last time, and I see this big G3s that are just sticking straight. I mean, his thirds, when this bull would look at him, he's hooked straight up, and I was like, holy cow. And big old sway backed, and just had a noggin on him. I was like, that is a cool bull. And he's just sitting down there, and he had about 40 head of cows with him too. So there's about 80 head of cows with 2 big herd bulls, and they're split up by some raghorns and a little creek running through them. I mean, these bulls are just screaming back and forth each other because they got too close to each other is what I think had happened. So there's 2 harems now that are right on top of each other with about 10 or 12 satellite bulls. I mean, it is the elk party of elk parties. And I just slid in. I kept working my way to the left. And pretty soon there was cows that were kind of up and milling around. Now, this is 12 o'clock in the afternoon. I mean, it's middle of the day, and they're doing – it sounds like Yellowstone Park. And I just kept sliding in on them. Pretty soon I ditched my pack, and I'm laying on my back, and it's just yellow grass that's about 16 inches deep. and I can see eyes if I sit up, but if I lay on my back, I can't see any elk eyes. So I just start dragging myself down the hill with my fingers, laid my bow on my chest, and you couldn't like drag with your heels, so that your knees came up. You just kind of had to leave your legs flat. And I drug myself. I ranged a tree that was 38 yards away. I got all the way down to that tree, and that put me 34 yards from a cow. And she was bedded, and I just sat right there with her and just waited. And a big 5x6 came up. I videoed him. I made myself pass on him. And that other big bull was at 101 yards bedded. And then pretty soon he got up and started walking right to that cow that I had at 34 yards. After about 2.5 hours, he got up. At 2:39, I videoed him. And at 2:41, I stuck an arrow in him. He worked his way all the way up, started checking cows, and a littler bull came in, and he came up to bump him, and then he turned perfectly broadside, bugled, and at that point when he bugled, I sat up on my butt and got to my knees and came to full draw and settled the pin. And I remember watching that arrow fly through the trees because it was through that burn. It was like shadow, sunlight, shadow, sunlight, shadow, sunlight. I could see that arrow like flickering as it went through the trees, and it hit him. And man, it was unreal. That in itself, he was standing over there. I haven't told this story to a lot of people, but he was standing over the top of a cow. He had just sniffed her, scent checked her. He was quartering away. When that arrow hit him, Brian, he didn't run. He just took it, just whop, and that arrow was sticking. It buried through the flesh, and about 18 inches of the arrow was sticking out on the offside. I could see my broadhead sticking out, and he just stood there humped up. He took about a half step, so he's facing dead away from me. He's below me on a bench. He turns. I knock another arrow. He turns, and when he spins, the blood was coming out of him on the ground. I could see it. He bedded down next to the cow. She smells the blood. She stands up. She starts sniffing the ground. She's kind of frantically like sniffing the ground, all this. In the meantime, he's like getting his eyes are kind of rolling back. His head's wobbling. He stands up next to her, sticks his brow tines in the ground, and then just front flips off the hill and slides down. And that was it. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. That just happened. And then the whole herd erupted. But that was my elk hunt. It was unreal.
So
that was a
epic,
long
man.
story.
Yeah, those are the days
story,
those are the days you dream of elk hunting. Like that's what we strive for, and it doesn't always happen. And sometimes it takes 10 days elk hunting to find that, and sometimes you find it like on the first couple days or whatever. You just work into the herd, but that you're always giving yourself a chance. Like hearing that elk all the way down in that bottom in that other canyon, planning to come out to a different trailhead and have your buddy pick you up. Like you just worked down there and gave yourself a chance. Like you didn't know the party was in there. You heard one bull down there that whistled a long ways off. And you just start working that way, and it's amazing. Like, you gave yourself a chance and then got in there to just the absolute super party. And catching a good win like that, man, that's just so advantageous. Like, a lot of times when you're working close on elk, the wind gets fickle. And almost every time when it gets fickle, they wind you, But to go in and to have that good win and know that you're playing it, and then you, like, never gave yourself away. Like, you just kept making these moves, never made a sound, but kept making these moves to just like poking over the hill and looking at them, trying to locate them over every ridgeline, and then finally finding them and being able to move and just get away with your movement and not give yourself away. Keep that element of surprise, and even like as close as you could get or stalk to that bull was 100 yards. But you were 35 yards from the cow, or 34, or whatever you said. But you just waited. You waited for your opportunity. Nothing knows you're there. It's just elk being elk. They're not on alert. They're just in there rutting. You got a good wind laying in the grass. You don't know how you're going to get up and shoot, or you don't know how it's all going to go down. But all of a sudden that bull gets up, and here he comes for that cow that you're sitting right by. And so many times you can put yourself in range of these cows, and it doesn't work out. Like, it may take you 3 or 4 or 5 scenarios like that before you finally arrow a bull, or you just get it all right on the first time like you and have them go right through. And also like passing those bulls, like that's not easy to do. A good 5x6, a good solid bull, like it's tough to level up and go, this year this is what I'm going to shoot or nothing. But you just kind of work your way up the trophy rungs of the ladder, and like you've killed a bunch of good bulls, and now you're just to the point in your bow hunting career where it's like, I know I can kill a big one. If I just set my sights for it, continue to hunt hard, like I'm going to create this opportunity. I'm going to get a chance at one of those big ones. And man, to see you like pull the whole thing off and have it come together, man, that's what bow hunting's all about. That's unreal.
Well, thank you. It's totally what we do it for. I mean, like that all, and then like, so not only that, I pull out the inReach and I text my wife, tell her, hey, I just stuck a good one. I'll talk to you sometime tonight. I don't know. It's 2:40, but I mean, that was one of those days. It all sounded pretty close, but I mean, I think by the time I got out to the pickup that day, it was almost 16 or 17 miles logged. It was a full day. And so then I inReached my buddy. I said, hey man, meet me at that spot that we talked about, but I'm coming out tonight. And I'd never been out that way. And I know you've done that a million times. I knew there was an out, but I'd never been that way. So there I take off, and I thought I'd be there at about 7, and I figured it would take me about 5 hours because it looked like it was about 5 miles. I figured by the time I got him cut up, everything taken care of, and I got 5 miles covered, I could hustle and get out of there. Well, I didn't get to his pickup till almost 10 o'clock, 9:30 or 10 o'clock. It took about 2.5 hours longer because I hit deadfall and everything else, but it was all part of the adventure. Like, that's 100% why we do it. Like, if it was easy, we wouldn't do it. Like, that's just it. Everything just was amazing about that hunt. So,
dude, part of the adventure, and like to have a good buddy too that's all in like you are, and
all in,
and
yeah,
he's able to pick you up at night or do whatever it takes. Like, gives you a huge advantage when you're in the mountains and gives you like options, to be able to do something like that. But that is why we do it, and like listening to you tell these stories, like there's a to find success with the bow and arrow is extremely difficult, and you have to pay your dues throughout years. Like, you've been at this a long time, and you've been consistently successful for a long time, like just season after season of good bucks and good bulls and making it happen. And it seems like it's like, I want to ask you what you think it is, but just like listening to your story, it's like you do all the little things. Like, you're always putting forth the effort, you're always putting forth the miles, giving yourself a chance, and then clutch when you do get those opportunities of knowing what you can get away with and what you can't. Clutch when all the pressure's on to make that shot, you drive that arrow home into that animal. And not to say that you've never missed, but you're good at capitalizing on those opportunities. It's like all these skills that come together to make you a consistent bow hunter that takes years to hone, but once you get there, man, it just starts to come together. And it's like most of these bow hunting units we hunt, I mean, they're 5 to maybe 20% success rate at best, but somehow, like, you figure out a way to buck the odds year after year while still working your full-time job and having a family and taking care of everything. But when it means that much to you, you just work tirelessly to like build that skill set to get to that point. Like, would you agree? Like, what do you think some of your best assets for being consistently successful are?
I think it's exactly a lot of everything you said. And then I know you think this too, but I would say one of the biggest things too is I don't want to say cliche because I always say predators never quit, but the never quit mindset of, not saying that you're going to have to go home sometimes, but just that perseverance of just always pushing it. And then also knowing that I do have a full-time job and obligations at home. So I have, say, 6 or 7 days. I have this run to get this done. So I go all in for 7 days. Like, there's no, like, I'm going to hunt this morning and then I'm going to take a little time off here. I'm going to go back to camp here. Like, when I'm hunting, it's like a job. Like, I don't know if I take it so serious that I turn it on. And when, like, that morning, when I say I was sitting up on the hill eating my oatmeal, it was because I was anxious to like get after it. Like, the game needed to start. The daylight needed to get there because I was so anxious to get going. Like, there's only so many hours of daylight in September, and I feel like that time clock is always ticking against me, always ticking against me, always ticking against me. So that drives me to just, I might, like that on that mule deer, I might botch a stalk. This wind might not be exactly perfect, but I got guys coming up from the bottom. This is the furthest. This deer's out in the open right now. He's grazing. Like, I need to make it happen. So I've blown. I think I'm very aggressive. I would say I'm a very aggressive hunter. I try not to be stupid in my aggressive moves. I mean, I think that's where the years and years and years of bow hunting, I've blown a pile of stalks. So I've honed my aggressiveness to be to be more beneficial, or to, I don't know if that's the word, but to help me out more. I'm still very aggressive, but I think I know when to make the move a lot better now than I did when I was, 20 years old or 16 years old. But I'm still very aggressive. And I think when I listen to other guys talk that haven't bow hunted as much, they'll be like, oh, like, look at this picture of this buck I got, or look at this picture of this bull I got, or man, I got close to this herd and I just didn't want to bump him. I don't think I've ever had that mindset. I might have a cool picture, but I damn sure hope I got a picture of him with a smiling face behind him. Like, when I get there, it's like, if I've gotten that close, like, I'm going to try and get an arrow in him. The only thing that's going to stop me is darkness or a wind that's blowing directly at him. Like, I mean, I can tell you other stalks where I was running out of daylight on a 6-point bull one time, and it was an avalanche slide, and his cows were in front of him, and he could hear brush breaking or grass behind him. I just walked right at him at full draw until I counted every step. I'd ranged him, and I just kept counting my steps at full draw, walking until I got to a comfortable distance. He stood broadside looking at me, trying to figure out what I was that whole time. And I got an arrow in him, he killed him. But I look at moves like that. I don't know if I would have done that when I was younger. You'd have thought I just sat on the edge of the trees and it would have got dark, and I would have watched that bull walk out of my life, But I'm very aggressive in some instances. Now, granted, I'm not chasing 400-inch bulls that, that once in a lifetimers in Arizona, where maybe you want to be a little more smart about your stocks. I'm not chasing 210-inch deer, 230-inch deer that, once in a lifetime stuff there. I mean, I'm chasing nice, respectable, mature animals that I'm willing, if I bump the stock, that I'll go find another one or I'll make it happen on them again. So I think the no fear of bumping them, really knowing that I have confidence I can find them again or get on another one, and then just the never quit, because, man, September, there's only so much daylight. So I think just that's kind of I think if I were to tell you, that's what it is, if I were to break it down.
Dude, I love it. It's so spot on. So similar. So the same. Like, always trying to give myself a chance, and way too aggressive when I was young. I've screwed up the stocks every way from Sunday. Like, it's just like, on good deer, on big deer. And so, like you say, that predators never quit. Like, it's really like, you've got a page, you've got awesome apparel too, hats and stuff from Predators Never Quit. You've got a page on Instagram, as well as S Davis 2506, which are both great follows. You're just such a diehard bow hunter, but you're so
Thanks,
right.
man.
Like it isn't cliche. It is like this never quit possessed attitude of just doing whatever it takes all the time, trying to give yourself a chance. And yeah, I'm like you, where I've been too aggressive, but I'm always trying to make it happen, and like, I try to, like you said, you're always learning in the field. You're always learning and getting better. And I think, like, I just keep developing my patience more and more, and the patience seems to help me out, because I've still got that never quit attitude, and I still got that I'll always go for it. I'll never make an excuse. Like, you go hunt with me, there's no deer that's ever too far, no bull that's ever too far. Like, I'm going to go try to give myself a chance and try to kill that thing. And I feel like I can kill everyone I see too. Like, I feel like I can kill him. It doesn't always happen, and I make mistakes, or maybe he wasn't in the right spot, but then I try to learn from that and go, okay, and try to hone into that environment that I'm hunting. Or just like that buck that you killed that kept going in the cedars, and you didn't have a play to make, or you didn't have a good play to make. And in your younger years, you might have dove in those cedars and went and busted that buck, but you knew better, and so you stayed out of there until you got a chance, and then you caught him in the buck brush, and then you went all in, and like, you had to jog back to your truck and jog back to him, but you knew he was in the open and you could kill him. Like, you saw it right there. And so I think you're right. Like, it's just this never quit possessed attitude. Like, a lot of the animals I've killed, like you talked about that bull that you walked at full draw, like, borderline reckless, but not in that twilight light. Like, you can get away with more in that last 5-10 minutes, like,
Exactly.
like the animals will put up with more. Like, all of a sudden, if you wait it out, you're down to the last 10 minutes of light, you can get extremely aggressive. Like, it's amazing what you can get away with in those scenarios, just in that lighting, just in that time frame, and killed a lot of animals from being really aggressive. Like, I killed a buck at the end of a hunt in a Wyoming backpacking hunt, which I love, like, your backpacking stories too, because I think that's like the purest way to bow hunt. Like, when you can carry everything you need and go chase animals around, like, in that vast backcountry. But it was the end of a backpack trip, like dang near out of food in Wyoming, and saw this buck, and I wasn't even sure I could make it to him before dark. And we called him I think we called him the 10K buck or something, because I ran the whole way over and around, and I had, this hillside. I was kind of hidden from his view, and then I had to go down the spur ridgeline. So I was hidden the whole way down there and then come over the top on him. I went like a possessed man to get over there and try to make a play, try to make something happen when I don't even know if I have enough time to get to him with daylight. And wouldn't you know, it works out in the last, I actually had minutes
That's
to
awesome.
spare, maybe a handful at best, but, creep over that ridgeline, and there he is, and he's feeding down there and has no idea, and put a perfect arrow in him. But that controlled aggressiveness, controlled aggression, and I think as we get older and become better bow hunters, we do develop more patience and knowing when to go all in and when not, just because we've made so many mistakes and busted so many animals, but we're still just gonna always give ourselves a chance, it seems like.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's that, yeah, the patience of knowing when. I was gonna say that is a big thing that I think I've learned almost every year. It's like you learn a little bit about where patience has helped you, but still being super aggressive when it needs to happen. And when it needs to happen, you got to go now. Like that buck this year, I shot a Wyoming deer, and
That was a great buck too.
yeah, and that deer, I saw him, and I was with a guy, Jordan Gill, awesome guy, and I've never hunted with Jordan. We got put together this year, and it was so sweet. He's a hell of a cameraman. And
yeah, I thought he's a photographer, right?
Yeah, Jordan,
Yeah.
He's a super good guy out of Montana and great photographer, and he's a hunter too, so it was so much fun. But we'd had some other guys that bumped a deer that we were on that day, and a stud, and I was kind of heads hanging low, and we're coming up with the game plan. It's probably 5 o'clock at night. This is September 4th, though, so we've got a lot of daylight. But it's probably 5, 6 o'clock at night, and I look, I don't know. I think rangefinder wouldn't even hit him. 1,800 yards away, I see 2 bucks bedded up on this butte way the heck out there. And the way the terrain laid, they had such advantage. Anyways, long story short, I was like, man, we got to go a long ways around to get to them. And I was like, well, we got to hustle. I mean, this is one where we literally got to hustle. And I was like, I think they might be up by the time we get up there. They might be up and feeding. It was so, 5 o'clock at night, September 4th. By the time we get to them, they could be up and gone. So we take off and get after it. And the last time I saw them was probably 1,000 yards away. And they were still bedded. And I slip in, get all the way up there and kick the boots off. And I work up there and sneak up on a bed that's empty. I get to 30 yards from the sagebrush where they should have been. I sneak up. There's nothing there. And I'm like, man. So I'm kind of exposed, but I was wisely sneaking up that ridge, knowing that they might be up and moving. So I was definitely looking right, left the whole time as I'm easing up, right, left, checking wind. Everything's good. See the sagebrush that they were bedded by. Both of them are gone. All of a sudden, to my right, at least I kept myself in the shade. So now the shadows have gotten long enough where when I snuck up to that hill, I had a little bit of shade blocking me on the right. So I wasn't exposed. I mean,
Smart.
I'm 6 foot. I was 6'2". I bet this shade is 6 foot. So maybe the top of my hat. But when I positioned myself, I slid up just underneath this rock, and I look to my right, and there's a deer walking right at me at 130 yards in the bright sun. Sun's in his eyes. I'm to the west of him. And I just sit tight. But there's Brian, there was no cover between me and them. It was yellow grass hill. I was probably, elevation-wise, 30 yards higher than them at 120 yards, 2 bucks. And I'm like, man, there he is. And he's just feeding and messing around. Well, every time he'd put his head down and just graze, his eyes would go into the sagebrush. And I would just get my feet set underneath me, kind of shift it, get to my butt. And all of a sudden, I just put my bow on my chest. And he'd put his head down, and I would just drag, and I was going right at him. I was above him, so I was working downhill at him in wide open yellow grass. I didn't even have sagebrush on my side, and I was just dragging my heels right at him, wide open. Every time he put his head down, I would just pull myself at him. There was a little knob I could see between him and I, and it was 90 yards from me. And I was like, man, if I can drop down about 15, 20 yards, I'll be able to get that little rise in between him and I. And pretty soon him and that other buck start working towards me from 140, 130, 120. At 120 yards, they bedded down in the sagebrush. They took an evening bedding spot. They got up and grazed. Now it's about 6:30, 6:45. They both bed. and the sagebrush is covering their eyes. I can just see his G2s up, so I can see his back forks. The other buck's bedded facing away, and I just keep dragging myself. I get below the view of that knob. I'm not to that knob, but I get to where that knob covers my eyesight, slip up there, and then I knew, of course, evening, like he's not going to be bedded that much longer, right? Because it was already, and I got all set, got my feet set. So instead of like crawling on my knees up onto that knob, I stayed back using my height, and I just got to right where my eyes could see over it, and I knew my arrow would clear that knob in front of me. So I was standing, because I like standing when I shoot, not on my knees.
Yep.
And it's a lot quieter, not crawling through the grass on your knees. Even if you take your pants off, you're still breaking those branches or just the dry grass. And so I stayed standing, and about an hour later, he stood up, stretched, walked 2 steps, turned perfectly broadside, and I was able to get an arrow in him without even knowing I was there. But all back to the aggressiveness and the patience. Like, I was so aggressive on that stock with, I look back at that one, and it's almost like you get a little bit lucky too, you know? Like, I just was like, I'm going for it. I'm going all in, and I'm just going to slide my butt right at him in the wide open. Every time he put his head down, and man, it couldn't have worked any better. And then they worked their way up and bedded, and then I was really able to get aggressive. But yeah, a couple times this year I was super aggressive, and it worked out in all scenarios. And it doesn't do that every year. I've had years where I could have blown all 3 of those stocks I just told you about, but it was the mule deer in Wyoming was definitely a super aggressive one.
Man.
I mean, wide open, right at him.
There's so many details to your story that just take years of bow hunting to be able to know those little details to the stock, and they make such a difference. Like the standing up, I'm same way. Like I'm a 15-yard or 20-yard worse shot from my knees, and not that I can't make those shots, but if I can get a standing shot, like I just know I'm gonna be rock steady. Like my pin doesn't wander as far. I can hone in, and so not that a lot of nearly half my shots do come from my knees, but if I can stand, I like that. So, like, you were coming up to that rise, and you didn't like crawl up to the top where you could just kneel and shoot. Instead, you're like maybe 3 yards back, and you still have to broach the top of the hillside to see the buck, but instead of being on your knees 3 yards ahead, you're 3 yards back standing and just bringing your eyes over that hillside. And it's almost like when you work up to a hillside that you're going to be looking over, you keep your whole profile down below that hillside. You take those steps to where you think you can see, and then you rise like really slowly up, and those animals catch that movement. And like if you're holding still, it's amazing what you can get away with, just like your aggressive stock in that blonde grass, where you just knew when to keep still, and you kept the element of surprise. Again, those bucks never picked you off because they never caught you moving. Every time their heads were down, you were sliding, and you were quiet enough where they didn't pick you out. But every time their heads were up, you freeze. And sometimes those buck heads or even doe heads will come up, and they'll even look right at you, and you think they're looking, you think they see you. And then pretty soon, like a minute later, if you just hold still, they just go back to feeding, like they don't pick you out. So like all those little nuances to the stock, like that have just taken you years of bow hunting to be able to learn all that and have that be like imprinted in your DNA, like imprinted in your instincts, where you don't got to think about it, you just react that way. And so you make a stock on a buck, but you're just doing what you can get away with. Now, us in our younger years, or like a like less experienced bow hunter, like instead you get way aggressive and you move with their heads up, and all of a sudden the gig's up and you busted that stock and you never gave yourself a chance, because you just don't know like what you can do and what you can't. But once you hunt enough and you get enough stocks and chances and opportunities and you learn from them, like what you can get away with and what you can't, and you push that line. You're just constantly pushing that line, and you're trying to make those right moves, and every time that buck picks up his head, you're frozen. And you're low enough profile to where he's not picking out your silhouette of a human standing there, like he can't pick you out. And then when his head goes back down, you're sliding down the hill. But it's like this delicate dance with these animals, like keeping that element of surprise, but also trying to put yourself in range in open country. And the other thing you did too is like using the topography. Like constantly hear you talking about these stalks and slipping into the bottom or using that little rise to hide yourself. Like it's amazing what you can do with very little topography. It's such a huge part of the stalk. It's like being able to recognize what you have, and even like hunting. I know you hunt a bunch of antelope as well.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
antelope, you never know what you have until you get out there. And it's kind of same thing with the deer. Like you'll make a plan and you'll think that this will come together and you'll be able to stalk there. But a lot of times you don't know what you got until you get to a couple hundred yards or until you get out there and make a play on an antelope, and you just use the terrain and you just keep trying to kind of hide yourself and doing what it takes to keep that element of surprise. But it's amazing how you can work like what looks like hardly nothing, and make it into something, in that open country. It's just wild, that topography, how it does lend itself to the stalk a lot of times.
It does. There's always a lot more folds in the ground than a guy thinks there is. That's what I always think of. There's a lot more folds and cuts, or just the way the grass lays or the way the grass sticks up in spots. And you were talking about like watching those deer too. A thing that I always think about is you'll watch those deer when they do pick their heads up, and when they're on to you a little bit or when they think down, they'll quit chewing. You'll see their mouths go, because that chewing is loud to them. Think of when you're chewing on something, you can't hear what someone's saying to you, but you'll watch those deer and they're looking. You'll watch their jaw chew, stop chewing. And then they that's when they're really assessing it. So that's when I'm like, if they've done that like once or twice, then maybe I don't move the next time they put their head down. Maybe I let them put their head down and graze for a little bit, pick their head up on their own. Then when they go down to graze, maybe that second time, like that's something I always watch is like, if they ever seem like they maybe have caught something or heard something, they'll do that. Like they stop chewing, and then before they go back to chewing, or that's, if they do the head bob, I think you've already been maybe busted. If they stick their head down and pop their head back up, that's a good old doe move. But I watch those bucks, I just think about that buck going in on that stalk, or like watching them as they're grazing, because a lot of the time a deer will pick his head up to take its next step. And so like watching, not only is their head down and they're grazing, but watching that front shoulder. And if that front shoulder starts to move, maybe you shouldn't be moving right then. Maybe that's where you stop, because he's about to pick up his head. It may only be 4 inches, but he's picking his head up to take a next step to grab that next little bite. So those are things that I definitely, and that's when you're in tight. I mean, that's usually when you're almost within bow range, if you can see all that stuff happening. But usually that's like the clutch times, is really watch that jaw. And if that jaw stops and they're really listening and they're not chewing, if they're chewing and slobbering and coughing, and then I don't think they give a shit. They're just kind of doing deer stuff, and they go right back to eating. I'm going to move on them. But whenever I see them stop chewing and you see like that flicker in their eye, kind of look around, and it's almost like they do like a 1, 2, 3 count. Then they'll start chewing again. I'm like, yeah, they heard something. They think something. They're onto something a little bit. So maybe I'll let them take 2 more steps without moving and let them calm down again. But that's one thing that I try to do. I mean, it doesn't always work out, but if you're in that tight, that's something I try to watch for, is that just body movement too.
So smart. Man, you're learning your quarry that you're hunting. It is like to read the mannerisms of these animals. Like you can read their behavior as you get to know them, and then that tells you what you can get away with and what you can't. When you need to slow down and when you don't. Like you can tell by looking at their ears, or even like a elk or mule deer, to look at their horns. I can tell if that mule deer's on alert or not on alert just by looking at his horns. Like not even seeing his whole body. Like you get to know these animals. And know, not that you know everything that you're thinking, but you know when they pick up on danger. When you're pushing the limit, or maybe they picked you out, where, like you say, now is where I'm going to stop moving, and I might sit there for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. Like you get to really know these animals, and I think it's a major asset. Like when I can see that animal that I'm stalking, like I like to use the topography in a hillside and be hidden if I can, but I also like to keep my eyes on that animal,
Totally.
when I'm coming over that ridgeline, or just looking which direction they're looking, or are they all feeding? Like those deer are going to key you in, or deer, elk, or whatever you're after. They're going to key you in to are they seeing danger? Do they know they're being hunted, or are they just feeding naturally, like being deer and elk? And those are usually the ones that you can kill, or the ones that that don't know you're there, and you keep that element of surprise. But yeah, reading those mannerisms is huge, and especially like hunting elk, like a 6-point bull. Like half the time, I never see the bull. I'm just watching his horns and what he's doing and where he's walking.
Yeah.
They're a dead giveaway.
Yep. Yeah, you watch those elk and the ears, like you said, that's a big thing. But you watch those cows, those cow elk. The thing about, I think that everybody sneaking up on elk is just it's just the sheer numbers. And so trying to watch one cow, you think, okay, I got this cow, I got this raghorn here, and there's my bull, right? There's my target. And then all of a sudden you take a step and you look over to your right and there's a calf looking at you. You're like, like elk are the tough ones just because of the sheer numbers. I think you can always keep eyes on that bull. And if you can get him off by himself, where he beds on the upper third of a herd, man, that's what happened this year on that bull. He was bedded towards the upper end of those cows. So it was key just to get close to that top end. I knew he was going to be there, but those friggin' elk, man, I've been busted so many times when you think you're just being a ninja and you look over and there's a spike standing there looking at you. You're just like, I've been busted a lot there.
Oh, no doubt. Me too. Yeah, it's always tough to beat those numbers. And mule deer too. They humbled me this year in the late season, like trying to hunt those rutting bucks that were with those does. The same thing. You're trying to hunt those numbers, and it usually isn't ever the buck that picks you out. It's all the does he's with. Or it isn't the bull that picks you out. It's all the cows he's with.
Yeah.
And you can only get so close, and then you just got to let it develop and let it happen, just like you did on that, sneaking in as close as you could to that cow, and then having that bull come check her out or whatever, and capitalizing on that moment. But yeah, you're so right. Like reading those mannerisms of those animals is huge. What about any films? You film any of those hunts this year?
The only hunt that I filmed, that was actually when Jordan Gill was there. He filmed that. He took pictures. He did photography and he filmed that Wyoming mule deer hunt. So I don't know what the plan is. That was with Stone Glacier. Those are a pretty good group of guys, and that was filmed. But as far as personal stuff, I put the camera kind of away this year, and I just wanted to hone in and do my own hunting and just get after it myself and not worry about the dang camera, to be honest with you. And I really wanted to get a big bull killed and not have to worry about the camera, and I did. So
yeah, it's nice to focus on the hunt too, isn't it? It's like so enjoyable too. It's like it so ups the difficulty level, like when you're trying to film it. And you're right. Like I don't know. Like I definitely have to mix and match. I couldn't do all of them that way because it puts you at a disadvantage, And when we love to do it so much, like sometimes I just want to go hunt, And so it is a mix and match for me. So I don't blame you a bit, and especially when you have a goal of killing a big bull, it's like, man, I'm going to put all my effort in trying to kill one. I'm not going to mess around with the cameras. I was just asking because I love watching your stuff on YouTube, so I was just wondering.
Yeah.
But I can't wait to see what Gil comes up with. Those Stone Glacier guys are great, man. I know a couple of those guys and really like them, and they're just great hunters too.
Yeah, they're killers themselves. That whole crew, man. Those are good guys. But
I'd hate to be a big bull or a big buck on the mountain with those guys chasing them for sure. Yeah, but no, that'll be super cool to see that come out. I bet the footage is epic.
Yeah, I think it turned out pretty sweet. So we'll just have to see. I don't know what their plans are. If it was more the still shots they were wanting or the video footage. So I know Jordan, he took a pile of both. So we'll have to see. I know the still shots. It was pretty cool. It was pretty cool to see from a different person's perspective because I never have anybody following me around with the camera. And you've seen it, yourself. And it's to see that perspective of it. It was pretty cool to see some of those shots and stuff. To I guess just to see it and to show my little girl. It's kind of neat to show her what Dad loves so much.
Yeah,
but
picture's worth 1,000 words, right? And when those guys capture it behind the lens, it's so tough to like set up self timers and try to capture, pictures of you. So like I do okay at it, but gosh, to have a cameraman there that captures it from that angle and like that's what he's focused on, you just get some unreal images that really capture what we love to do.
Yeah, and the authenticity. I mean, there was so many pictures I didn't even know he took, like I didn't even know he was taking a picture. He just said, do your thing. I'm going to follow you. And so I did my thing and he followed me and man, it turned out pretty cool. So it was a whole new experience. Like I said, I'd been solo deer hunting for like the past 5 years. Every one of my deer had been by myself, and to have a guy following around, it was it was kind of cool actually. I actually talked to somebody because usually I'm sitting there by myself for days on end, but I actually got to visit with someone at a camp this time, so that was unique.
It's nice too when you can share a hunt with somebody, isn't it? Like having a good hunting
Yeah.
partner or a good buddy to be with and share it. It does make it enjoyable for sure.
It does. I got my hunting partner, Zach, and me and him, we do everything together. But even when we go elk hunting, it's like, all right, man, you're headed this way. I'm headed this way. See you either in a couple days or maybe we'll hear each other on the inReach if we kill something. I mean, like, just like you and your buddies. I mean, you might have the trucks might be parked at the same spot, but you're gone. Like, and you don't see each other for a couple days. So that's how it's been the last few years and to this year. So it was kind of cool to hook up. And then when I killed that bull, my buddy, Zach, he picked me up that next morning, and then the next day, him and I and another friend actually came up and we packed that bull out. So just the pack out too was fun. The camaraderie there was cool, and it was a grueler. It was one of those ones where we through packed it, so it was like 11 miles, grabbing the meat about 3/4 of the way through, and then ran it all the way out. And it was just a good one. One of those ones where people are trying not to fall in the creek because our packs were so heavy, and it was just steep and gnarly, and we were listening to bugling bulls as we were packing elk out. And yeah, man, like I said, this September. Only thing that could have capped off this September to be better is if my wife Peyton, we got so close. There was one canyon she didn't really want to drop into that hellhole that I was in, so we were hunting some of the fringe areas there. And when you hunt the fringe areas, you usually run into a few more people, And so there was 2 opportunities that we were close with her throughout the rest of the season. And one time there were some guys that were walking out in the wide open, and either the elk saw them or winded them. And then the other time the guys started bugling and cow calling at the elk that were on this ridge. And we were within about 60 yards of them. We were just about to seal the deal on a bull. And so she got close, but she didn't get one. But that would have really capped off the season if she would have got an arrow and a bull. So next year, I guess.
Yeah, she's a great bow hunter. It's cool that you guys have that and can spend that time together. And yeah, I mean, it's just the way it goes sometimes, right? Hunting public land, it's like a lot of times it's just you versus the animal and you're the only one there. And then, every once in a while there's a guy walking a ridge, oblivious to the elk down below, or, maybe he's already on them and you have to go the other direction,
Yep.
But yeah, every once in a while they'll mess up a stock. It's just part of the game. You try not to let it get to you. But, it sucks so bad when you're like 60 from him, like about ready to close the deal.
Yeah.
What a heartbreaker.
Yeah, I mean, if it would have been a guy that could reach you, sure, her range isn't quite that far. So, I mean, yeah, we were right there. It was right to where, and that bull was just working the back end of the herd. We were coyoting them, as you would call it. We were just on a beef cow trail, so it was just powder, just quiet. And we were right on the edge of the timber. Daylight was cracking. They were nose to the wind walking away from us, and we'd slid in right behind them, just nose to the wind right behind them, and we'd cut the distance. And we were on a trail. It was so quiet. I mean, I was more worried about the dust we were kicking up, that they were going to see that more than the sound or anything. I mean, that's how quiet it was. We were sliding right up in on behind them before everybody started calling at them. But that's, like I said, part of the game. And we got to see bugling bulls, and she got to watch that bull scream and go nuts. So that's what it's about. It's not always about sticking an arrow in something too. We always got to remember that. Like, I just look at every time I come off those mountains or come out of those hills, it's my body's beat, and it's like that's what I train all year for, is to this is what I live for. It gets my heart going, whether I get to draw back and put an arrow in something or just get close and come out there with my head hanging low. That's all part of the game.
It is all part of the game. Yeah, you got to enjoy all of it. I just wanted to state, like, walking on that cattle trail, those hard trails, man, those things are key hunting elk. Like, when you can get on a trail,
man,
they just keep you so quiet. Like, on any stock, like, if you come across a trail, it's just a gold mine. It's like, I could actually move quiet.
Yeah,
like,
and quick.
So
usually
great.
You can speed up. You get there, you just speed up too. Like, if you're trying to cover country, you get on a trail and it gets quiet and it gets fast. I mean, you don't have usually debris in the way, and you can move. And it was exactly that too. We were scooting up on those elk. Just, they were nose to the wind walking, and we slid in. Like, it was perfect.
Dude, so awesome. Well, man, I think I could talk to you about bow hunting all night. Another stellar season, dude. So fun. The conversations are so in depth, and it's like just hear the experience, when I talk to you about bow hunt. But man, I really enjoy this. I always really enjoy having you on the podcast. Thanks a bunch for coming on, man.
Oh, well, thanks a lot for having me, Brian. And I love listening to your stories, and I've learned a lot from you just listening. So you're a wealth of knowledge, man. We all look at what you do. So it's pretty awesome to visit with you about bow hunting, because I could do the same thing. I could talk about it for hours.
Well, thanks so much, brother. Yeah, we'll keep in touch for sure. And yeah, I'd definitely have you on the podcast again when you have another epic season like I know you're gonna have. You're gonna put in the work and get it done like you do year after year. But still fun, man. Thanks again, and let's keep in touch.
All right, sounds good, Brian. Thank you.
Okay. All right, guys, that's a wrap. Man, such a great conversation with Sam, isn't it? He's just a diehard bow hunter. And so many of the things he says just resonate in my own hunting, and or things that I do or that brings attention to it. And I really think, being a cerebral hunter, like thinking about this stuff and thinking about how you're going to approach the hunt, thinking about what other guys do in those situations, just furthering our knowledge in the planning phase or in the knowledge phase. It's going to be wired into our instincts and make us better in the long run. So I just love listening to that stuff or having those conversations. Just a great episode. So thanks again to Sam Davis. Make sure to check out his social media. You can find him Predators Never Quit, and also Sam Davis. I think he's S Davis on Instagram there, but you can find him. Yeah, just a super solid guy and great bow hunter. So thanks again to him. Thanks again to our sponsor, Stone Glacier. Again, so excited to partner with these guys. They just have great mountaineering gear. So impressed by these sleep systems, these tents. I just got it the other day, that modular system I was telling you guys about. They got a great price point, and it's really, one of the only companies building these bivy tents, set up ultra lightweight, minimalist, and then being able to have a modular system that you can add to it for whatever your needs are on that specific hunt. So excited. I'm excited for that freestanding one-person tent as well when that comes out. It's just going to be a bomb-proof shelter. It's going to have its poles set up really easy. It's going to be a little bit heavier than a bivy tent, but they do so good at keeping their weight down on their gear because they're mountain hunters themselves. They know it. So impressed by these tents. So impressed by these sleeping bags. They're just great, high-quality sleeping bags. Yeah, it's going to be great stuff. Really excited about our partnership this year and using all their gear on my hunts. So if you're in the market, make sure to check them out over at Stone Glacier. And check out everything we've got going on at Eastmans. A couple great magazines, Eastman's Bow Hunting Journal, Eastman's Hunting Journal. Some good Beyond the Grids here. Really excited to see we start releasing our new season in April, I believe. So, we still have new stuff coming out from now till then, but all the stuff I filmed this year, all the stuff the guys filmed this year will start coming out in April. So really excited for that. Be on the lookout. Man, just fun having these conversations. Just had some super solid podcasts here lately. I just love these in-depth conversations. It's just bringing you guys the content to help make you consistently successful, and it's out there for us. Like, there's great critters out there, and there's great opportunity for adventure out there right now, like in a lot of these different western states. And I know, like, there's more people hunting, with the COVID, there's crowds, but you can just you can still find your own experience. You can still go find quality critters. It's just so fun, such a fun endeavor to be involved in. So yeah, I'm stoked for this season, stoked for drawing some tags. Been applying here and there and getting ready, getting in my training here, running, shooting my bow, and looking forward to next season here. So it'll be here before we know it. The time to improve is right now. So thanks you guys for the support. I really appreciate you. And with that, I'll check in with you next week.